the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
Hello and a very good morning. Thanks for tuning into News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi. Joining me here in the studio is my colleague Nancy Bora, and what our focus over the next couple of minutes is going to be is exactly what's taking place in the Gaza Strip, in Israel, what's going to happen in Iran. Even as the humanitarian crisis is deepening, there is shortage of fuel, there is absolutely no food, there is a cut on the water supply, and as per United Nations, only 24 hours of fuel is left at all the hospitals, Nancy. Several people still reeling under the harrowing airstrikes by Israel. I mean, of course, we all know what happened on the 7th of October when the Hamas, in that unprecedented attack, which now what we're learning is that 1,400 Israelis were killed. That attack took place, and after that, an onslaught by the Israeli Defense Forces on the Gaza Strip. Now, northern Gaza, people have been asked, the Gazans have been asked to flee towards the southmost point, towards the Rafah border. The Rafah border, again, the only border point across the Gaza Strip that is not controlled by Israel, solely by Israel. You also have Egypt, that's a big major stakeholder over there. Anthony Blinken, the United States Secretary of State, he's been doing a massive round, laboring really in the Middle East, meeting Saudi Arabia, he's met Iran, he's met with UAE, and he's again going to be back in Israel today. All of this is happening even as the ground offensive, the tanks, the boots are already being deployed near the Gaza border, ladies and gentlemen. That ground offensive could happen in the next couple of minutes, days, hours. We don't really know. But what I can tell you for sure is that the tensions are certainly palpable. Pro-Palestinian protests and pro-Israeli protests have certainly divided the globe. But ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest that we're bringing for you right now. On the 10th day of the Israel-Hamas war, what we're picking up at this point is that 1,400 Israelis have been killed in this unprecedented Hamas attack. Over 3,500 Israelis are injured at this point in time. Many say that number is going to go up. Benjamin Netanyahu has convened an emergency cabinet, vows to demolish Hamas. And demolish over there looking like an understatement, Nancy, because he's been using the word annihilate. And the United States has deployed its second aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean. That second aircraft carrier essentially means there are going to be another slew of aircraft. There is going to be another set of frigates. All of this even as Iran has threatened to open a second front against Israel. And Iran says, if you don't stop the bombing, we will have to interfere. The United States Embassy is going to evacuate all the Americans in Israel by sea. Many were suggesting it's going to be the Haifa port. That is going to take place today. But other developments as well, as the United States President says that Israel occupation of Gaza would be a big mistake. This is coming in from a partner of Israel. And now it says that Joe Biden is on record for saying Israel occupation could be a big mistake. 24 hours more fuel at Gaza hospital, says UN, United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. More than 2,600 people killed as Israeli strikes continue in Gaza. That's the Gaza death toll. And the Rafah crossing is going to open today at 9 a.m. local time. Is what we're picking up, ladies and gentlemen. Rafah crossing. A lot of aid, Nancy, is standing on the other side now.
Definitely, and I mean, Kabir, you rightly said that it was an unprecedented attack, but it was an unprecedented attack for the Israelis, because I was reading about it. There was a report from the New York Times, and they said that the Hamas, there were 10 terrorists who were on the motorbikes, 5 motorbikes, and they had a color-coded map of the Hamas, of the Israeli territory and the way they entered. So it was a completely planned, it was the way they strategized it. I mean, it raises a lot of questions against the intel failure of Israel as well, and what was Benjamin PM was doing was something that, it really raises a lot of questions.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But Netanyahu has been on the ground. He's visiting all those temporary IDF command centers as well. But take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Residents of Khan Yunis, even as you're looking at all this smoke billowing on the Gaza skyline, on the Gaza Strip, residents of Khan Yunis, a popular place in the Gaza enclave, searched through the rubble of a building destroyed by an Israeli airstrike on Saturday as hope diminished to find survivors. Israeli tanks were stationed along the border with Lebanon on Sunday morning as troops prepared for a ground assault on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip in the country's hit back for the unprecedented assault on its territory, and Iran warned of far-reaching consequences if Israel's bombardment was not stopped. Now, Israel has vowed to annihilate the militant group, the terrorist group, Hamas, in retaliation for a rampage by its fighters in Israeli towns just about 10 days ago, in which its terrorists shot men, women and children and seized hostages in the worst attack on civilians in the country's history. Some 1,300 people, now that number has gone up to what we're learning to 1,400, were killed in the unexpected onslaught which shook the country, with horrifying mobile phone video footage and reports from medical and emergency services of atrocities in the overrun towns and kibbutzes. What we're taking a look at is how the tanks and the boots and the reserve army has been mobilized and deployed near the Gaza border for any moment that particular ground offensive can be launched. Now, Israel responded by subjecting Gaza to the most intense bombardment it has ever seen, putting the small enclave home to about 2.3 million Palestinians, many call it an open-air prison, under a total siege and destroying much of its infrastructure. Well, now my colleague Manish Jha, who is in Israel, is getting us the latest reports and the actual correct information from ground zero. He spoke to a couple of Israeli soldiers. One of them even took out the time to say that he might just visit India very soon.
इस वक्त टीवी9 के कैमरे पर आप देखिए कि मार्क 4 टैंक में जो टैंक के सेल को टैंकिस्ट प्लेस कर रहे हैं उसको आप देखिए कि कितना बड़ा सेल है। तो आप सोचिए कि एक तरफ से जहां हमास के रॉकेट के हमले हो रहे हैं वहीं दूसरी तरफ जो मार्क 4 टैंक के सेल से उसका जवाब दिया जाएगा और बीच बीच में जो धमाके की आवाज़ यहाँ पर बॉर्डर पर सुनाई देती है, फ्रंट लाइन पर सुनाई देती है, वहीं ठीक दूसरी तरफ देखिए अमित, दूसरी तरफ आप दिखाइए बहुत सारे जो टैंकमैन हैं वो एक एक सेल को लेकर जा रहे हैं और उसको अपने अपने टैंकों में। तो देखिए कभी भी शुरू हो सकता है ये ऑपरेशन। कुछ घंटे के बाद हमास पर को नेस्तनाबूद करने के लिए ये ऑपरेशन जो होगा उसके लिए देखिए अभी किस तरीके से इस टैंक में जो टैंकिस्ट हैं वो सेल को प्लेस कर रहे हैं ताकि एक साथ अटैक किया जा सकता है। आज की रात भारी पड़ सकती है हमास पर, आज की रात गाजा पट्टी पर भारी होगी। उसका सबसे बड़ा सबूत यही है कि सोल्जर अपने हिसाब से तैयारी करके उन्होंने रख लिया है, बस एक सिग्नल का इंतजार है। जैसे ही वो सिग्नल मिलेगा और ये कूच कर पड़ेंगे गाजा पट्टी में दुनिया के सबसे खतरनाक ऑपरेशन को अंजाम देने के लिए, जिसके बाद जैसा कि आईडीएफ का कहना है कि फिर 100 साल तक कोई भी इजराइल की सरजमी पर आक्रमण करने का हिम्मत नहीं जुटा पाएगा। यहाँ पर हम आपको उन सोल्जर्स को भी दिखाएंगे, उनसे बात भी करेंगे और उनसे जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि ग्राउंड ऑपरेशन करने से पहले वो क्या सोच रहे हैं। तो चलिए सबसे पहले मुलाकात करते हैं, बात करते हैं इसमें। हाय, दिस इज मनीष झा, आई एम फ्रॉम इंडिया।
Hi, Gabriel.
So Gabriel, you are here and any moment you can go for war. So before coming here, what you were doing?
Before coming here, I was working in an accountant's office, and I was doing some accounting.
So basically you are an accountant and then when your country called you, then you are here.
Yes, that's very correct.
Hi sir, what's your good name?
Micha.
Micha. And before coming here, what you were doing?
I'm a school teacher. I teach.
School teacher?
Yes, I teach civic studies and mathematics to the 10th grade.
And now you are having weapon.
I'm heavy weapon because that's what my country needs. I hear the call and I have to come here. Not something that I really want to do, but something that I have to do.
You know, I was in Russia last year. I saw lots of Russian citizens were leaving the country. But when I was coming to Israel, I saw lots of Israeli persons were coming back to Israel. So do you think that this is the specialty of all Israelis? Whenever your country needs you, you are here.
Yes, as we see by the statistics, reserve soldiers are being 150% of reserve soldiers arrived. For myself, I didn't even receive a formal invitation to come here. When I saw the situation on Saturday, I took my uniform, took my bag, packed it, and although we don't have public transportation on Saturday, I asked my father to take me right down here.
Oh my God! So normally, how much time you get when you call for the duty?
It really depends. It varies. We were called up straight away. I was called up straight away, but it depends on people and it depends on the situation.
So both of you have a first experience to come at the ground zero, like Operation Zone.
Again, I'm sorry.
My question is that both of you have a first experience to do duty at Operation Zone.
Well, I didn't take any part on any formal operation. We served in the regular forces. You know, all the only the batash.
Daily operational
Daily
duty.
operational defense missions. Yeah, that's what we did.
My question is, before coming to war zone, what was your job? Like what you were doing?
My job is to prepare now for the next step. I don't know what we're going to do. I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
But we are prepared, like you see, and that's all. Israel going to win this war. Okay. All the terror going to.
Okay, and you were saying me that you have some connection with India. So
Yeah.
please tell us, what is your connection with India?
What? I didn't.
The
understand.
India link. What is your connection with India?
My father born in India. I don't remember which city, but he's born in India, and you know, I have a big connection to India.
Oh, great. So have you visited India?
Not because I'm here, but after I'm
Afterward you will visit India.
Yeah, I will visit, and maybe we see on a cup of coffee one
Oh,
day.
great. Good
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just asking, so when you got information that you have to come here, so what was your reaction, your family's reaction?
So we don't have to come here because we are instructors, we are not combat soldiers. But when everything started, of course we wanted to come and help. And our families are worried, I think everyone is worried. But we know we have to do this, we have to help. So we are here.
Well, that was the ground report we were getting from the war zone. Now moving on, thousands of Palestinians fled the north of the Gaza on Saturday from the path of an expected Israeli ground assault, while Israeli pounded the area with more airstrikes and said it kept 2 roads open to let people escape.
As explosions were seen on the Gaza City skyline Saturday, the Israeli military said its forces were preparing to implement a wide range of operational offensive plans with, quote, an emphasis on significant ground operations. Thousands of Palestinians continue to flee the northern Gaza Strip ahead of an expected Israeli ground assault, while Israel said it kept 2 roads open to let people escape. Outside Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was seen in a government press office video visiting troops and telling them to be ready for the next stage without elaborating. Reuters video showed paramedics and rescue teams operating in an area of northern Gaza, which was hit by an airstrike, forcing them to scramble away quickly. Israel has bombarded the Hamas-run Gaza Strip with unprecedented airstrikes after Hamas fighters stormed through Israeli towns a week ago, gunning down civilians and taking scores of hostages. Some 1,300 people were killed in Israel. More than 2,200 people have been killed in Gaza, according to authorities there. But Israel's attacks on Gaza failed to halt Hamas missile strikes deep into Israeli cities. On Saturday, rockets smashed into a greenhouse in Escalation and wounded 4 people at a kibbutz. Back in Gaza, crowds of foreigners hoping to escape waited at the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Egypt said its side is open, but traffic has been halted for days because of Israeli strikes. This young British girl said she is desperate to leave.
I'm really in fear. And every time I just have to have the thought of me dying in a bomb in Gaza, it's not a good thing, but it's a really scary thing for me.
A senior U.S. State Department official said the United States was working to open the crossing on Saturday to let some people out and had been in touch with Palestinian Americans who want to leave Gaza.
Well, now, Nancy, even as we saw all those people lining up at the Rafah crossing, which again we're learning is going to open up today, I don't know how many people are going to be able to cross the Rafah border because Egypt has maintained that it's not going to allow 1 million people to come in and give themselves a refugee crisis at this point in time. But they're willing to help, which is what they've always done. They always send aid from that particular crossing. But a lot of diplomacy that's taking place in and around. Iranian foreign minister met with the leader of Hamas. Iranian foreign minister met with other leaders in the Middle East. Even as the top US diplomat is also doing the rounds in the Middle East. Take a look at this. The top US diplomat, Anthony Blinken, he's arrived in Israel on Thursday, and after that he's gone to Abu Dhabi, he's gone to UAE. He's expected to be back in Israel today, but as he is preparing for a particular round of meet with the Israeli authorities, especially Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli foreign minister, because the IDF is preparing for a ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, which now Joe Biden has come out and said is going to be a big mistake. Occupation of the Gaza Strip is going to be a big mistake. Now, It is also being seen that Anthony Blinken has visited Qatar, Jordan, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and yesterday he met with Al-Sisi, the top leader of Egypt as well. Now, the conflict has raised international concern that it could spark a wider regional war. And Blinken said that there is a determination in every country that he went to make sure that this conflict does not spread. Blinken met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh, and then Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo, where he received a blunt assessment from Sisi of Israel's response. Listen in to what Anthony Blinken had to say.
Israel has the right, indeed it has the obligation, to defend itself against these attacks from Hamas and to try to do what it can to make sure that this never happens again. As I said in Tel Aviv, as President Biden has said, the way that Israel does this matters. Needs to do it in a way that affirms the shared values that we have for human life and human dignity, taking every possible precaution to avoid harming civilians. No one should do anything that widens this conflict in any way or that furthers aggression against Israel from any other direction. I had very good conversations both with the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia and here in Egypt with President al-Sisi, and also heard, I think, a lot of good ideas about some of the things we need to do moving forward, including practical ideas on getting assistance to Palestinians in Gaza who are in need, but also good and important conversations about the future and where we hope ultimately together we can bring this in a much more positive way.
Well, now, why it's important to understand what Blinken is doing is of grave significance right now is that Tehran has sent a special message, a secret message via the United Nations to the Israeli authorities telling them if the bombing of the Gaza Strip does not stop, well then watch out for dire consequences. Tehran warned of far-reaching consequences if the IDF's bombing of Gaza is not stopped. This, as diplomats worked around the clock to prevent the Israel-Hamas war from escalating into a regional conflict that could include Hezbollah and Iran. Iran has issued a public warning and sent a private message to Israel through the United Nations that it could intervene if Israel continued its military campaign to root Hamas out of Gaza. All of this according to a report that was first published by the Walla news site and then confirmed by the Jerusalem Post. Even as you're looking at these black and white thermal images of the Israeli strikes, the constant bombardment of the Gaza Strip, where what Israel says is targeting key Hamas operatives, key Hamas bastions and targets that are being hit. People have already fled from the northern part of the Gaza Strip right down to the south part of the Gaza Strip. Now, all of this, even as the United States Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, speaking in Tel Aviv, in Israel, yesterday, said that the chamber will push through a military aid package to help Israel in its war against the terrorist Islamist group Hamas.
On a trip to Tel Aviv with other U.S. lawmakers, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the chamber would push through a military aid package ASAP to help Israel in its war against the militant Islamist group Hamas.
We say to Israel, America will stand with its ally Israel. So we will work with the Israeli government and the Biden administration to assemble the most generous package possible. Now, people will ask, what about the House?
Schumer on Sunday said among Israel's requests are additional interceptors for its Iron Dome missile defense system, which has been operating nonstop, shooting down Hamas rockets from Gaza, and precision munitions.
The needs, of course, are quickly evolving over time.
He also said he urged Israeli leaders to assist with efficient humanitarian assistance while minimizing civilian casualties in Gaza.
The Biden administration has underscored that democracies like ours are stronger and more secure when we uphold the rule of law. We echoed that to the Prime Minister of Israel and to every Israeli official we met. We told them that as well as military assistance, intelligence assistance, diplomatic assistance, we wanted humanitarian assistance. And I said to them, find the fastest, safest, and most efficient way to do so. We also told them it was really important to, and it's difficult, we know it's difficult, but still we have to minimize civilian casualties.
Also on Sunday, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the Biden administration hopes to push a new weapons package for Israel and Ukraine through Congress that will be significantly higher than $2 billion. But how any bill moves through Congress, currently without a speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives, is unclear.
Well, now, the Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip just this weekend since the Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Well, several thousand Gaza residents could be seen on roads heading out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave within 24 hours. Watch this Reuters report for more.
Carrying mattresses and personal belongings, residents of Gaza City were seen walking south on Friday after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave the northern half of the Gaza Strip within 24 hours. Israel said troops backed by tanks had carried out raids inside the Gaza Strip Friday. That was its first announcement of a shift from an air war to ground operations in order to root out Hamas fighters a week after their deadly rampage in southern Israel. Hamas, which controls the densely populated area, told Gaza residents to stay put despite Israel's deadline. Mosques broadcast the message, hold on to your homes, hold on to your land. While many residents said they would not go, several thousand people could be seen on roads heading out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but it was impossible to tell their exact numbers. The United Nations said Israel's call for Gaza civilians, over 1 million of them, to leave was impossible to carry out, quote, without devastating humanitarian consequences. Here's UN spokesman Rolando Gomez.
The United Nations strongly appeals for any such order to be rescinded, avoiding what could transform what is already a tragic situation into a calamitous situation.
Israel rebuked the UN statement, saying it should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Since Hamas fighters burst across the barrier fence and killed 1,300 Israelis on Saturday, Israel has responded with the most intensive airstrikes of its 75-year conflict with the Palestinians. Gaza authorities say 1,800 people have been killed. The United Nations says 400,000 people have already been made homeless.
And you know what, Nancy? For the longest time, people are now sharing videos on the internet, on the social media about the humanitarian crisis, which is actually of grave significance and importance. We must talk about it every now and then, every day. Many people on the internet and the netizens, now that they're divided, continuously saying that, what the Hamas did was pure evil, but what now Israel is doing is a war crime. And that debate is going to go on. But it's important that when we bring stories as journalists to the people, the sacrifices of the journalists on the ground should also come across. Take a look at this next one. Because the Reuters video journalist Issam Abdullah was killed and 6 others got injured in southern Lebanon just this weekend when missiles fired from the direction of Israel struck them. The Israeli army says it's going to investigate the death of the Reuters journalist.
The Israeli army said on Saturday that it was investigating an incident in southern Lebanon in which a Reuters journalist was killed and 6 others injured. A military spokesman said the death of Issam Abdullah was, quote, a tragic thing. A Reuters videographer who was at the scene on Friday said missiles fired from the direction of Israel struck the group. Alongside journalists from Al Jazeera and AFP, the Reuters team was providing a live video signal for broadcasters near Alma al-Shab, close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and Lebanese militia Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. While other news outlets, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, said the missiles which killed Issam Abdullah were Israeli, Reuters could not establish whether they were fired by Israel. Israel's UN envoy Gilad Erdan spoke to reporters at a briefing on Friday.
Obviously, we would never want to hit or kill or shoot any journalist that is doing his job. But when we're in a state of war, things might happen.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the incident underlines the danger of the conflict spreading and the risks to reporters.
I want to say how much this demonstrates the enormous risk of spillover of this conflict, namely in relation to Lebanon. And I want to pay tribute to the journalists that so many, unfortunately, the largest number ever last year, so many journalists are paying with their lives the work they do to bring truth to everybody in the world. And I present to their families my deepest condolences.
2 other Reuters journalists, Te'er al-Sudani and Meher Nazir, who were wounded in the incident, were released from a hospital after receiving medical care.
Smoke billowing over the Gaza skyline. People running helter-skelter, panicking in the Gaza Strip. These are some of the common pictures that have come across over the last 10 days. But that does not mean that the Hamas is not retaliating. Rockets are being launched from Gaza as well. Take a look at this next one. Residents of Sderot that evacuated because of rocket fire from Gaza, and reports say that nearly 2/3 of Sderot's population have now left the town. Few residents are choosing to remain in the town, with many opting to seek shelter elsewhere. And Sderot was in the line of Hamas rocket fire. Many of them were heard saying that they've been living there for the last 45 years. And now they're having to pick up whatever they can, their mattresses, their pet dogs, and they're having to leave. talks more about the larger humanitarian crisis now, doesn't it, Nancy? These are non-combatants, these are civilians. These are people who not necessarily want a particular part of the war, the conflict, which is why they're having to move. But so many people who don't know anything else, who know exactly where they belong, who they are, their own roots, being uprooted, that particular feeling of exodus, it's not a nice one.
Well, definitely, Kabir. I mean, whenever we are reporting a news like this, the war broke out, there are a lot of political interest that comes in between. Everybody wants to have the power, they want to win the war, but I think what goes unnoticed is that the humanity is the one that loses every time. And that is what is happening right now. The civilians, they're fleeing the country and they don't know where they're going to go, what's going to be their home, and how are they going to survive in their lives ahead is something that they still have to figure out.
And you know what's sad? It's sad when the mourning turns into complete grief, because now Israelis are having to bury their dead following last week's attack. Some solemn visuals that are coming across. Back-to-back funerals were arranged at Jewish cemeteries as Israelis bury soldiers and citizens that were killed in the unprecedented attack on the 7th of October and the 5,000 plus rockets that were launched by the Hamas from the Gaza Strip. Many people still mourning and grieving their loved ones, people that they've lost in that unprecedented attack. What we're picking up is that 1,400 Israelis got killed, soldiers and civilians alike, and especially the youngsters at that Supernova music festival as well, running for their lives. Footages, real harrowing visuals that were shared on the internet of what transpired on the 7th of October. A large-scale funeral at Jewish cemeteries, beg your pardon, in Israel. Meanwhile, a picture in stark contrast, ladies and gentlemen. Going back inside Gaza, where residents of Khan Yunis prepare food for the displaced Gazans. Millions now stand displaced. Only yesterday, the UN officials were heard saying, Nancy, that, well, if you are leaving us here to die, make sure that it's sooner rather than later. Supply is running out. Just 24 hours of fuel left at hospitals. This even as residents of Khan Yunis. The resilience in humanity also comes across. We saw the same when the Turkey earthquakes happened. Yeah. We saw the same when Afghanistan, which is still reeling under the trauma of the recent earthquake, and we're seeing it over here yet again. Now Israel has asked the residents of North Gaza to evacuate from the area in what many see as a warning ahead of a possible ground invasion by the Israeli Defense Forces. But people in Khan Yunis and Ramallah, a lot of people have left in those cars, like we were showing the people, the viewers. Right now, a lot of people that have stuck back, they're staying that ground. It could be because of the Hamas. The Hamas has been, distributing flyers and making announcements, asking people to not migrate to Egypt, asking people not just in the Gaza Strip but also in the West Bank to not migrate, don't lose your ground, do not go. And which is what Israeli authorities are saying is a propaganda. Hamas is using people as a human shield. Whatever that may be, on the ground the people are trying to help those displaced, people from the north that are going to the south, and those that are now without their homes. I was earlier listening to a woman who was saying that this is all I know. I don't want food, I don't want water, just take me back to the place that I know. I'll happily live in a tent. Now in Khan Yunis, another story, another development, where injured Gazans were taken to a Khan Yunis hospital after an Israeli airstrike. We're of course having to treat those visuals very carefully because of the violent onslaught of this airstrike. Thousands of Palestinians have fled to southern Gaza after Israel warned them to evacuate the north before a planned ground offensive against Hamas. This in response to its attack on Israel. However, those who fled to southern Khan Yunis found themselves being bombarded by Israeli warplanes. Post and not a lot of hospitals that are operational right now, let me tell you that. But take a look at that. People still searching for their survivors. People still searching for their loved one, even as the Israeli strikes continue. The constant bombardment of the Gaza Strip at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces. Look at that. Look at that, Nancy. I mean, it paints a real stark picture in front of us. A picture that is incomprehensible, for you don't have the capacity to understand what's really happening on the ground. For you have to be there to really understand. You have to be there. I mean, I saw a father who had his infant all wrapped up, the mortal remains of his infant in his hands, and he couldn't be asked for a comment by the media personnel over there, but I'm sure that he was absolutely soulless at that point in time, out of words, had nothing to say.
Definitely, Kabir. I mean, whatever they are going through right now, it's even hard to imagine, because we saw that infants, newborns, we were just seeing the visuals, and we saw how parents were rushing with their children who are barely, looks like they're 7 years old, 5 years old, and they are rushing them to the hospital. And now we are getting reports also that in Gaza, fuel is going to go out. So, I mean, how are they going to survive? And these are 1 million people that we're talking about. 2.3 million Definitely. In totality, 1.1 million that have had to flee North Gaza, go into the southern part of the Strip. How many hospitals really functional? How many doctors available? How many doctors fit and healthy? Take a look at that. People running with their children, limping themselves but making sure that their children survive. I've seen parents sprint one after the other, literally sprint one after the other to get their children to safety. And that skyline, that Gaza skyline, this is the latest that we're picking up from the Gaza Strip, ladies and gentlemen. Smoke continues to billow over the Gaza skyline as fears of conflict spreading and escalating and spilling over into the entire Arab region continues to grow. I'll tell you that, Nancy. That smoke is painting a real picture for us. And it is going to spill over now, isn't it? Or do you think the diplomacy and the laborious meetings that the US Secretary of State and all the foreign ministers in the conflict-ridden region are taking place, all those meetings and dialogues that are taking place, will it be able to help the conflict from escalating, from spilling over into the other Arab nations? Well, Kabir, we had US, we had UN, they all are coming in and they're trying to negotiate. Whether it's Iran, whether it's Egypt, they are saying that this war, we condemn the war because civilians are the ones who are being targeted. But when you talk about the two sides that are actually involved, whether it's Israel or Hamas, it doesn't seem like they want to, take the route of peace. Both of them are coming out and giving statements like, we won't stop until we demolish the other party. And Iran, Benjamin Netanyahu, he just came out and he said, I'm not going to stop the attack, I'm not going to stop the airstrikes until and unless I demolish Hamas, until and unless I get hold of each and every terrorist who has caused the mass destruction in the country. And even though Hamas on the other side, I mean, it's the 10th day we are talking about, Israel has been continuing airstrike, but we can still see that rockets are still being fired from Gaza.
And even as we're looking at the smoke billowing from the Gaza skyline, we don't know how much of that skyline will exist. Pope Francis yesterday called for humanitarian corridors to help those under siege in Gaza, and again has appealed for the release of hostages held by the terrorist group Hamas. Francis spoke as Israel was readying its troops for a ground assault in retaliation for unprecedented attacks it suffered when fighters rampaged through its towns, shooting men, women, children alike, and seizing hostages as well.
Dio è molto rispettoso della libertà, molto rispettoso. Continua a seguire.
The Vatican yet again urging for a dialogue. So we've seen people fleeing the northern part. We've seen how Tehran is now actively playing a role. We've seen how US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is meeting various leaders all across the conflict-ridden region. Israel and Hamas standing their ground, the humanitarian crisis deepening. It's as if desperation is being looked at amidst darkness. What people are worried about in the Gaza Strip is that there is no internet for them as well. They can't really put their voice out as well. So when you're wiping out an entire community, it's being wiped out when there is complete blackout for them as well. On the other hand, nobody can ever forget what happened on the 7th of October. The Supernova Music Festival, all the killing that happened, evil prevailed on the 7th of October. But what's happening right now, is it war crime or not? That's going to be the big update, even as United States is sending in support. Anthony Blinken is in Israel back again today, and we don't know when Israel is going to launch that particular offensive. But you can count on News9 to bring you all the latest developments. We have our boots on the ground. Lots more coming right on the other side. That's a wrap from Nancy and my side. Keep watching News9 Live.
'He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first?
So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
Three years after the deadly Galwan clashes, India has doubled the pace of infrastructure creation on the border. India's Border Road Organization is accomplishing mission impossible, creating infrastructure to secure us from our foes across the Himalayas.
Look at China. They don't have to climb up like us. Once they are on the Tibetan plateau, the construction work, the maintenance work, everything is fairly easy.